Stapakaya dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupini avataravarishthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So today we are going to discuss the perhaps most widely known school of idealism belonging to the Mahayana lineage, Mahayana tradition. We are discussing Shunyavada, Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna's Shunyavada may not qualify for being called an idealistic philosophy in comparison with the Yogachara system. But frequently scholars may consider it a bit idealistic in the sense that it is not at all realistic. The difference is Yogachara system considers all objects to be non-existent, except ideas and concepts that emerge in our mental horizon, in a chittam. So chittamat, Vijñapti Matrada Siddhi is a well-known book by one of the Yogachara philosophers. So, for example, it's a Vasubandhu, one of the Yogachara. So Vijñapti Matra means only Vijñanam. So Vijnanam roughly translates into consciousness in modern English. So this Yogachara system is sometimes called the Vijnanavada because it focuses on consciousness. In that respect, it may be called Vijnanavada, but a much more widely accepted and acceptable term is Yogachara because they primarily depend upon meditation and contemplative practices for reaching this experience of Vijñapti Matrada Siddhi. When you realize the truth that everything is only Vijñapti, everything is only Vijnana, everything is only consciousness. External objects do not exist independent of our perception. Perception in the sense, ideas emerging in the mental world. So, in that respect, it is the only exclusively, completely idealistic system of philosophy in Buddhism. So, we may, of course, the primary exponents of this system were two brothers, were Asanga and Vasubandhu. Asanga was the elder brother, Vasubandhu was the younger brother. Both of them were born in a place called Gandhara, which roughly may be called a region which includes a lot of today's Pakistan in northwestern frontier and also a lot of places in Afghanistan in the adjoining area. So it is not Kandahar as frequently mentioned. Kandahar is in different parts of Afghanistan. But some scholars would tell you that Gandhara was an ancient kingdom because it is clearly mentioned in the Mahabharata, going back to 3300 BC. That means roughly 4th century, 4th millennium time in Mahabharata mentions Gandhara. And also in the Shukla Yajurveda, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, in the discussion of Tattwamasi, can you hear? Can you hear? Hey Shashi, you're not visible.
Ask them to unmute. Maharaj, we can't hear you right now.
So, yeah, I think, let me see. Can you hear now?
Yes, now we can hear.
There was a problem. What happened?
It was an accidental mute for somebody else.
Okay, that's right. Okay, fine. So I think, I mentioned that the primary exponents of Yogachara system were two brothers, Asanga and Vasubandhu. Both of them played a very, very important role in integrating meditation and yoga with rigorous philosophical analysis to explore and to philosophically analyze consciousness, perception, and the nature of reality based on this analysis. So it's called, the technical word they used called chitta matra, means mind only. So all external object is a mental construct. There is a very ancient work in belonging to Yogachara, so it's called Langavatara Sutra. Sarvam chittamatram edat yadidam traidadhukam. That's the external objects do not exist outside of chitta. I mean, the mental world, mental perception. That's the idea behind. Now, of course, here they talk about three natures, three characteristics of this consciousness. That is, the technical terms are parikalpita, paratantra, and parinishpanna. Parikalpita means imagined, just illusory projections. Paratantra means something that is dependent upon something else, that is dependent origination, called pratitya samutpada. The unstoppable flow of consciousness. This is one dimension of consciousness. The other one is illusory projections, which are only just parikalpita, means just imagined, comprehensively imagined. Pari is a Sanskrit prefix which means in a very comprehensive manner. Parinishpanna is reality, the actual perception, the actual understanding, free from all conceptualizations. In other words, consciousness itself, without any connection to any connection with any external objects. That is the nature of parinishpanna, means perfected, independent consciousness. To reach this level is the goal of human existence. There are many, many interesting works belonging to this lineage, this tradition. Some works are supposed to be direct instructions from Buddha himself. And some works are coming from authors like Maitreya, one of the ancient writers, and then of course Vasubandhu and Asanga, two brothers. They together made this world. So for example, Alaya Vijnanam, Pravritti Vijnanam, Idi Chittamatram, Mano Vijnanam cha. So this is a very interesting point to keep in mind. Alaya Vijnanam. Alaya means a repository, accumulated, the original storehouse. Pravritti Vijnanam means like waves in an ocean or in a river. The wave, or let's say, think of the ocean without wave. It is alaya, means storehouse, repository, the source, the storehouse. The waves are pravritti vijnana. So different perceptions that we get, that we receive, they're all just like waves. There is one fundamental repository, that is alaya vijnana. Now another important point that may be a great interest to any student of Yogachara system is they have a unique concept of what they call Tathagata Garbha. Tathagata Garbha Sutram. Sutra means a hymn. That's the only word we can use. Sutra means long poetical work. So according to this sutra, in every human being, there is a potential to attain Buddhahood. If he works hard through these Chatvari Arya Satyani and Eightfold Disciplines and practices these spiritual disciplines, he can bring out this inherent, indwelling Buddhahood. So, Tathagata Garbha. Garbha means womb, the source. So, in everyone there is this potency, the potential to become a Buddha. So, some Buddhist scholars in later days, modern exponents, try to explain this in the light of the rebirth stories of Buddha. So, you can, of course, this we have discussed many times in the past, so I don't want to mention it again. And today morning, 11 o'clock, we had a lecture on Vedanta and Buddhism. So I discussed this point. The Eightfold Disciplines roughly compares with the fourfold spiritual qualifications called sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, Vedanta. So if you are interested, you can discuss during interaction. So the point is, in everyone there is this potency to become a Buddha. Now, and they argue that unless this potency is there, you cannot really become a Buddha. Is hearing audible? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
sorry.
unless there is something within us, this Buddhahood, we cannot attain nirvana and become a Buddha. So all these ideas are linked to Yogachara system. So pravatti vijnanam are independent individual dimensions of consciousness. Alaya vijnanam is, in fact, the original exponent of Alaya vijnanam was Asanga himself. Asanga was there are different views, both were brothers. Asanga was the elder brother. Vasubandhu was actually a realist belonging to the Hinayana tradition, was a realist, Sautrāntika and Bhāshikas. So he became a Mahayana follower under the influence of the elder brother Asanga. This is the story that goes like that. So the three important names that we have to keep in mind in the Yogachara tradition, the most important well-known names are Asanga and Vasubandhu. But there is another earlier figure, his name is Maitreya. He wrote a well-known book that is Madhyanta Vibhaga Shastram and Abhisamaya Alankara. These are important books by Maitreya. And Asanga wrote Yogachara Bhumi Shastram and Mahayana Sangraha. We will refer to these books in course of time. And Vasubandhu wrote the well-known celebrated foundational work, that is Vijñapti Matrata Siddhi, attaining that level of spiritual enlightenment when you realize that everything is Vijñapti or Vijñana, everything is consciousness alone. All external objects are unreal. They do not have any existence independent of mind or Vijñapti, Vijñana. So that's why Vasubandhu in Trimsika and Vimsika, Vimsika means 20 verses, Trimsika means 30 verses. Vasana nama kleshanam karmanam chapi aseshataha sada samprasudam tat yeyam heduphalasrayam. So vasana nama kleshanam karmanam chapi aseshataha. So the impressions of defilements, what defilements means here, when this Vijñapti is only pure reality, Vijñana, Alaya Vijñana, it's only reality. All other impressions caused by actions are all defilements on this Vijñapti. So all these impressions of defilements and actions are entirely stored here. They are flowing like a river. Tam prasrudam. Prasaradi means flowing continuously without a stop. And it's all the cause of karmic seeds. Hedu phalasrayam. Hedu means the cause, the condition for which it comes into existence. Seed is the hetu or cause of the plant or the tree. So, and the plant is in the result, the phala in relation to seed. So everything gives existence to something else. Everything is changing, everything is coming and going. This is nothing but pratitya samutpada, in other words. So everything in this world, all experiences involving different objects in empirical phenomena, they're all cause-effect flow, nothing other than that. And they also talk about 8 dimensions, levels of consciousness. 5 senses. Actually, 5 senses roughly compare, what we, our eyes with which we see, the visual, the auditory, and what we touch, what we smell, what we taste, all this. Mind, the mental faculty, these are also dimensions of consciousness. But remember, these are all coming and going like a river that flows. Now, when you reach Vijñapti Matrada Siddhi, that attainment, which roughly is equivalent to, more or less equivalent to Nagarjuna's realization of Shunyata. Nagarjuna says, when you realize that all these empirical experiences, including our birth, life, death and rebirth, all belonging to Praditya Samutpada, dependent origination. When you realize this, then you come out of samsara when you get this experience of Shunyata, Loka Samvriddhi Satyam and Paramartha Satyam. Loka Samvriddhi means empirical, common sense experience. When you transcend that, you realize Shunyata. Again, you have to remember, Shunyata doesn't mean, it never means nothingness or emptiness. Shunyata is a mystical experience. So, I want to mention a few things here. When you study philosophy, especially spiritual philosophy which has a clear, inseparable link to real life, then if you define philosophy as a journey from one idea to another idea, then you will never get the true implication of either Shunyavada or Vijnanavada, the Yogachara system. Because these philosophical ideas were practiced by all renouncing monks and laymen for centuries to reach some kind of higher consciousness, which they called freedom and liberation from all worldly problems. Now, when you read Berkeley or Jeremy Bentham or J.S. Mill or even Kant, immediately you don't go and practice Kantism. You teach, you read, you study Kantian philosophy, critical pure reason, go to university and teach and get your paycheck. That's all. And then you are whatever else you are. But the Yogachara philosophers, they were studying all this. They were studying the works of Maitreya, Asanga and Vasubandhu. Then they were going to some caves and sitting there meditating. And then they thought, if you don't accept it, they thought there is some kind of higher spiritual consciousness, which they believed liberated them from all worldly entanglements. You don't do that by studying Berkeley, Jeremy Bentham or J.S. Mill or Kant or Hegel. You don't do that. You study the book and you teach. That's all. So this clear distinction should always be kept in mind when we study Shunyavada and Vijnanavada, all the systems, or Vedanta for the matter. It has some inseparable link to real life. It has something to do with what they live and how they live, what they live for and how they live. So, for example, I mentioned in my today's talk in the New Temple, Buddhism got really established as a distinct philosophical tradition long after Buddha's passing away. In the first Buddhist council, apparently it must have been held in 483, according to some schools, immediately after Buddha's passing away in 480. 560 to 480 is Buddha's time, 80 years. And according to some other schools, they do not consider. There are many various views. The first council in which 500 Buddhist monks participated was held in Rajkir, called Rajagriha. Pataliputra, the capital of Magadha Empire, under the presidency of King Ajatashatru. He was a Hindu king who also followed Jainism and Buddhism, King Ajatashatru. That was held under the leadership of King Ajatashatru, and there was a great follower and disciple of Buddha, Mahakashyapa. He played a prominent role. And these Buddhist monks who were meditating, who were practicing all these disciplines for years, they have memorized Buddha's teachings given in Prakrit, and it was written in Pali script. And that's how Tripadakas came into existence. So they were not jumping from one idea to another idea. So philosophy for Buddhism is not a journey from one concept to another concept. It's a journey in real life. And the journey took place in their inner spiritual space. So that's an important point to keep in mind. So 8 levels of consciousness. For 5 senses, I mentioned, visual, auditory, and so on, 10 sense of smell, sense of taste, and so on. Then mind, mental, then Krishtamana they call, defiled self-awareness, or normal misconceptions that we have. And Alaya Vijnana. Alaya Vijnana is the central source, the storehouse of all consciousness. So this is just to give you an idea of this. First, total rejection of all external objects. External objects and perceptions do not have an existence independent of the mind. So a few books, one is Maitreya, the earlier one, and these well-known texts are Madhyanta Vibhaga Shastram and Abhisamaya Alankara. And then the 2 brothers, one is Asanga, other one is Vasubandhu. Asanga was the author of Yogachara Bhumi, which is a very important work, and Mahayana Sangraha. Vasubandhu wrote this magnum opus, that is Vijnapti Matrada Siddhi, attaining Vijnapti Matrada, the experience where you realize consciousness alone exists, everything else exists only depending upon consciousness. So this is just to give a background to this. So, as I mentioned, they were born in what is now called, what may be now considered to be the place, adjoining maybe the far eastern parts of Afghanistan, bordering on Pakistan, and Pakistan's northwestern frontier. It's called Gandhara. But according to ancient traditions in the historical books, Gandhara was a country associated with the dynasty of a Hindu king. So even Mahabharata, there is a character called Gandhari. One of the is the wife of the Kuru, Dhritarashtra, the father of the Kuru brothers. So originally she is from Gandhara, so that's why she got the name Gandhari. So Asanga belonged to the 4th, 5th century AD. I just want to say a few things about their contribution. Asanga's main concept was this Alaya Vijnana. He was the original exponent of this idea, the Alaya Vijnana. It means there is this storehouse, repository of all dimensions of consciousness. You are able to perceive something because Alaya Vijnana takes the form of Pravritti Vijnana, independent dimension of Alaya Vijnana. So, Pravritti Vijnana roughly compares with the waves in a river or ocean. Alaya Vijnana is the ocean itself. And he was the one who synthesized the Yogachara teachings. And as I mentioned, his well-known book, I already mentioned here, his most important book is Yogachara Bhumi. And also well-known book he wrote, Mahayana Shastra Sangraha, etc. Mahayana Sangraha. Vasubandhu's contribution was that he was the one who articulated one central thesis, one important central thesis in Yogachara system, that is known as Vijnapti Matra. The mind alone exists. A doctrine that says mind alone exists, nothing else. And he completely refuted the realistic schools of Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas that we are going to discuss in the coming days, Kumaralata and others. There were two schools of realism. One is Sautrantika, the other is Vaibhashika. Sautrantikas believed that we can only have an inference of something that exists. We can never directly perceive. It's called so. The representationism, sometimes it's called. May not be a very accurate translation frequently. They believe that we cannot really directly perceive anything. Because when we perceive something, then we talk about what we perceived. By the time that object has changed its nature, everything is kshanabhanga, means everything is momentary. So when you say, I saw something, you saw something, but you make a statement or you refer to it only after that object that you have seen has changed. Why? Because everything is momentary. So you can only infer. Every knowledge, every reference is only a reference. Only an inference. Every reference is only an inference. That's called Bahya Anumeyavada. Means we can only externally, we can only infer. That is Autrantikas, one school of realism. And other school of realism is called Vaibhashikas, Mahavibhasha and other books. We'll discuss that later. Which tells you that you can actually perceive things directly. So, Bahya Pratyaksha Vada means you can externally, you can perceive externally all objects. That's the two schools of realism. So, one of the great contributions of both Vasubandhu and Asanga was they refuted these realistic schools. And again, the Yogachara Bhumi was an important book, Asanga. Yogachara Bhumi, in that he said that there is always this Buddhahood that is already there. We can attain Buddhahood through spiritual disciplines going from one stage to another stage of evolution. So, and Vasubandhu, as I mentioned earlier, his main task was that he philosophically defended Yogachara system by refuting this Sautrantika school of Bahya Animeyavada and the Vaibhashika school of Bahya Pratyakshavada. So these two great scholars and sages, remember they are all great sages. You have to remember, if you look at the picture, we don't know whether real picture or not. Muhammad Bakhtiyar Khilji in the 13th century came and destroyed the entire Nalanda University. So today, if you go to Google, you can see the pictures of Gandhara region, which had huge monasteries, where thousands of monks lived. You can still see pictures of monks from Far Eastern countries visiting with great reverence and all that. That is in Gandhara country, today's Pakistan. And also Nalanda was have the most celebrated seat of learning and teaching Buddhism. Asanga was there, Vasubandhu was there, Dharmapala was the abbot, the principal of that university, when the great Chinese monk and pilgrim came to India to study Buddhism. Mostly he studied Yogachara system. So Dharmapala was the principal in Nalanda. So Mahayana Sangraha and Yogachara Bhumi Shastra and Abhidhamma Samuchaya. These are some of the books of Asanga. And Vasubandhu wrote Vimshati. So Vimshatika, Vimshatika means just 20 verses, and Trimshika means 30 verses. On consciousness only. On Vijnapti Matra. Consciousness alone exists. And his own commentary on Mahayana Sangraha. These are very, very important books on this. So Sarvam Trimshika Vijnapti Matrada. So according to Vasubandhu, he says everything is only Vijnapti Matra, only on just consciousness alone. I mean, things don't exist as objects independent of our awareness of it. And again, Asanga says, Vijnana Seva Pravritti Anyada Uvalabdheki. The Vijnana Seva Pravritti Anyada Anuvalabdheki. So that means is activity of, so Vijnanasya Pravritti. Vijnanasya Pravritti Eva. Only the activity of Vijnana is real. Because if Vijnana is not there, you won't be able to perceive any object. Anyatha, otherwise, anuvalabdhehi, you won't be able to perceive. So these are a very, just we are giving just a brief introduction today, and we will go to other subjects later. Just a brief introduction. One important point which I want to mention in this context is the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, which is an ancient sutra. We don't know who the author was. There are different views regarding the sutra. And like Lankavatara Sutra, another ancient book, ancient sutra literature, belonging to Yogachara tradition. The idea that there is a Buddhahood or the potential to become an enlightened one that is present in all of us. According to some scholars who study comparative philosophy, I tell you that the concept of Antaryami, the indweller, that is Atman, Brahman, present in everything. That idea is behind the philosophical construct that we call this Tathagata Garbha. So anyone can, if he tries, can reach Buddhahood, Nirvana. So that idea is supposed to be a kind of a transference of the Advaitic idea of indwellership of Atman into Buddhism. Asanga and Vasubandhu, they developed Yogachara system into a distinct systematic school. Asanga, his main contribution was that he emphasized meditative insight and articulated, as I mentioned earlier, Alaya Vijnana, and also his concept of this Trisvabhava, three natures, that is Parikalpita, which is illusory, not real, and then Parinishpanna, the perfected, and then the dependent. The fact that everything in this world is caused by something and going to be caused of something else, so nothing is permanent. That concept of pratiti samutpada. These ideas were later elaborated into other systems. Now I want to give a few more important points in this context here. It is said that Vijnapti Matrada concept is the core philosophy Yogachara system. So if somebody asks a question, Yogachara believes that Vijnanam or Vijnapti or awareness or consciousness alone exists. Then how do we or why do we perceive external objects coming one after another? Externally. Unless they existed externally, there is no way to explain why they emerge. That's because they are all present in the subconscious level, called that Ale Vijnana, the storehouse. So when the five senses of perception connect with the external objects, immediately from the Ale Vijnana, these different dimensions of consciousness, individual consciousness called Pravritti Vijnana, they come into existence. And then we see it is something different from Ale Vijnana. So it is nothing but Ale Vijnana, just like looking upon the wave in an ocean as different from the ocean itself. Wave is only one manifestation of the ocean. This is how they explain this. And I already mentioned these 8 levels of consciousness, that is the 5 dimensions of consciousness based on what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we smell, and what we taste, plus mind. Mind has different dimensions. Mind which is afflicted, Krishta, it's called Krishta Mana they call. Normally, when we perceive things in normal life, without understanding that those things are only momentary flow of sensations at the mental level, those things, those experiences will defile our chittam, our mind. Then what happens is mind becomes klishtamana. But all these are stored up in the Ale Vijnana. So Ale Vijnana is the foundational layer of consciousness. Ale Vijnana contains potential for all possible experiences and linked to karmic seeds. It's called a Ketu Palasya, means Bija, Bija Rupa they call it. So whatever we have done in the past, those actions are gone. The external instruments with which we perform those actions, they no longer exist. But the vritti or the residual effect in seed form, they already exist in the Ale Vijnana. In Vedanta you find these seeds constitute your Sukshma Sarira or your subtle body, which is not visible, and these karmic seeds will manifest in different ways in succeeding life cycles. But according to Yogachara system, these karmic seeds are accumulated and stored in Ale Vijnana. And when we again are born, when we are born again, when we go through certain circumstances where those karmic seeds may connect and re-manifest and re-experience in this life, that becomes the cause of this continuous flow of samsara, which is called praditya samutpada. But when we realize that it is only a praditya samutpada, it is dependent origination, then we come out of it. So dependent origination is nothing but a way of implying their permanent existence and also implying their impermanence. Once we realize this, then we come out of samsara. And as for these three swabhava, it's again another important contribution of Vasubandhu and Asanga. 3 intrinsic nature of phenomena and how our awareness or consciousness or vijnanam or vijnapti perceive those things. One I mentioned, that is parikalpita, that is a nature which is imagined. Parikalpita means comprehensively imagined, mistaken perception of duality, subject and object. We live in this world, we think external objects do have an existence independent of subjects. This is parikalpana. I mean, it is a mistake. It's an imagination. When we realize this Vijnapti Matra, then we realize that external objects do not have independent existence, independent of the consciousness. And consciousness as Ale Vijnana, we may call the macro dimension of consciousness, which is like ocean, which contains all potency for different expressions of the ocean, different manifestations in the ocean, like waves, drops of water, tsunami, all these are different expressions of the potency, the potential within the ocean. Like that, Ale Vijnana has this potential because it is the repository of all accumulated seeds or samskaras, karmic seeds. It's called Hetu Phala, karmic seeds. Not karma, but the residual leftover of karmas. Whatever we do, we cannot escape leaving behind a seed. The seed is in the form of samskaras. Buddhists do not go as far as yoga system in explaining this movement of karma. Yoga system, you do something, it leaves behind a vritti, and vritti, when a number of identical vrittis are generated by the same action, it produces a strong tendency called the samskara. And when you have the samskara, in any life, even 1,000 years after the action, there is a possibility that you may repeat that action again because of mere vasana. Vasana means a natural aptitude. For example, the aptitude of a child to learn music or art, maybe because of so many years or maybe life cycles of accumulated tendencies. And sankalpa, and again repetition of the same action. All this happened because the seeds are accumulated in the Ale Vijnana. And it is the great work of this Asanga who articulated this idea of Ale Vijnana. It's very important. So these are very, very important. Ale Vijnana concept of Asanga and Vijnapti Matra concept of Vasubandhu, and also the Tathagata Garbha concept that comes from Tathagata Garbha Sutra. These are all very, very important. Technically, even if you don't believe in God or anything, you can, if you study Yogachara system, we will know a lot about how and why we act and think and move in a certain manner. You don't have to refer any book, because suddenly you get a new flashlight into the inner world of our own mind when we study Yogachara system. Most probably, some of the great commentators on Patanjali Yoga Sutra must have been highly influenced by the works of Asanga and Vasubandhu. So one is Parikalpita dimension of consciousness or nature. There is three subhavas, three natures. Second, Paratantra, that is depending upon something else, that is the empirical world, the nature, and the interdependent origination of empirical phenomena based on causes and effects, conditions. Everything has a causal dimension and also an effect dimension. That is Paratantra. The third one is Parinishpanna, where you have realized the supreme truth, you are perfected, you understood, you have reached perfection, the ultimate reality is now clear to you. These are three swabhavas, three natures of human mind in relation to consciousness. Then there is called Asraya Pravritti. It means this idea is a reference to the profound transformation of the storehouse, Ale Vijnana, into a state of mind, purified wisdom. leading to liberation. That's why. So, all these seeds are accumulated in the Alaya Vijnana by yoga practice, yoga achara. I mean, the word meaning itself, they were practitioners of meditation. So, there is meditative practice. The mind which is Krishtamana, the mind is defiled, the mind in which lot of impurities, lot of desire, selfishness leading to continuation of life cycle, all those things are purified, and then that helps you to realize our true nature, realizing and culminating in the realization of true nature. Very interestingly, the whole process is very similar to Karma Yoga and its effect on human mind in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. So Shankaracharya says, for example, Karma Nishthayaha Chitta Suddhidvarena Pusartha Hedutvam Na Swadandriyana. Jnana Nishtadu Swadandriyana Pusartha Heduhu Anyan Apeksha, Shankaracharya says. The idea is repeated in Gita Bhashya and also in the Mandukya Bhashya. So when you practice Karma Yoga, what is happening is Chitta Suddhidvarena. Mind becomes purified. So when we practice any activity without any selfish motive, that activity generates a lot of sattvic purifying material. And that will make my mind ready for a transcendental experience. Because what stood as an obstacle for attaining this transcendental experience of true nature was lot of defilement, that Krishtamana, as Asanga and Vasubandhuda called it. Desire, selfishness, sadurmi, all many other things, avidya, smedha, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, all these things. It's called kleshas, called Patanjali, we call it kleshas, panja kleshas. So that's why Krishtamana, the Krishtamana is used in Patanjali system also, in the commentary works. So mind becomes defiled because a lot of dirt and filth are accumulated in the mental system by selfishness, by extreme liking, extreme hatred. All these are different levels of filth and dirt and defilement. Like dust that covers a glass or a mirror, so we won't be able to see our own representation, our own reflection in the mirror. So by doing a duty, whatever it is, without any selfish motive, what happens is this defilement, dirt and filth are removed. And then what happens is all the samskaras, all the seeds which are accumulated in the Alaya Vijnana become purified, and then you reach your own true nature. Mindfulness is another practice to attain this. Mindfulness, what happens is, we become aware of something, but we are not trapped. Normally, whatever we do consciously in this world, we get attached to it. When we have a desire for the results of our actions, we get imprisoned. We get caught and trapped. So, but if we can do everything without a selfish motive, what happens is, after all, everyone has to do something in this world. So we are practicing awareness. But awareness has the possibility of trapping, imprisoning, getting us caught. We practice detachment. So mindfulness. So without awareness, you cannot practice detachment. And without detachment, awareness can be a trap, a prison. So Sati Upattana Sutta and Mahasati Upattana Sutta, belonging to the Hinayana tradition, the Pali canonical tradition. that is Tripitakas. So Buddha's discourse to the laity, the common people, it was a more elaborate one. So it is called Mahasatyupattana Sutta. It's somewhat bigger. A shorter version is Satyupattana Sutta, which is more closely studied because it is an address to a group of enlightened people, including monks and nuns and others. So when we become aware of something, which we should also be able to practice detachment. So this idea, how to reach this paridispanna level of consciousness, from parikalpita, from what you call the mistaken perception, where mind is krishtamana, mind is defiled. We should reach this paridispanna, the perfect stage, and this is possible through mindfulness according to Yogachara system, and of course through realizing the shunyata according to Shunya system. So this is one thing. So one of Buddha's well-known work, which it's supposed to be a direct discourse from Buddha, it is called Arya Sannidhi, Arya Sandhi Nirmojana Sutra. Arya means noble, higher, noble. So Arya Sandhi means connection. So you get rid of nodes, bondage. How to do it? So it means, so in a way it's called profound secrets mentioned. So Sarvam Chittamatram Iti. Everything is Chitta. This is the way to attain this liberation from bondage. One important statement that comes in Yogachara Bhumi of Asanga. Asanga here, of course, in Buddhist tradition, when you see many of the books published, even in today, in the Vajrayana system, which is part of, related to Mahayana system in a broader sense, you find certain authors belong to a prehistoric or semi-mythical era. For example, the Tathagata Bodhisattva Maitreyanatha. Asanga is a historical figure. So this well-known book, Yogachara Bhumi, is attributed to Asanga, but some of the traditional Buddhist scholars will tell you it is coming from Bodhisattva Maitreya. So in that, Asanga says, Vijnanasya Pravaha Sadatam Pravartade. So the same that we quoted earlier, Prasudam Pravartade in the earlier quotation. The Vijnana is always flowing. So you have seen all these different manifestations of individual Vijnana, individual fragments of consciousness you find. But when we realize that they are all part of the Ale Vijnana, and then we practice mindfulness, that is awareness plus detachment. And what happens is, we get out of this pravaha. Pravaha means continuous flow. And then we can see the pravaha. We can be a witness of pravaha. The witness aspect, which is related to mindfulness idea, that is very important, directly coming from Advaita, witness. So when we realize this Vijñapti Matrada, then we become witnesses. Then we can be witness to all these Pravarti Vijñanas. Because we are aware of them, but we are detached from them. Then we will be able to objectify ourselves, which means there are no objects. So the very distinction between subject and object itself disappears. That is parikalpita, that is only imaginary. For a paridispanna, for the perfect nature, there is no object distinct from subject. And subject is Vijnana. That is what Vijnana Vada means. kind of subjective idealism, we may call it. That can be another word for that. Another very important work of Asanga is Mahayana Sangraha, which systematically presents Yogachara doctrines, including discussions on Alaya Vijnana and also the process of transformation of Alaya Vijnana, leading to Buddhahood enlightenment. Alaya Vijnanam Bijasraya means. So, this Alaya Vijnana, a proper understanding of Alaya Vijnana, when we reach, then we will be able to detach ourselves from all these pravritti vijnanas. The idea is repeated again and again by Vasubandhu. Vijnapti matram trisvabhavam. All these parikalpita, paratantra, paridispanna. These are all just Vijnapti matra. So as such, they are not Vijnana, but they cannot exist independent of Alaya Vijnana. That means independently, none of these objects associated with Parikalpita, Paratantra have independent existence. All empirical phenomena exist because of Alaya Vijnana. When we realize this, objects disappear. Objects are perceived and realized to be unreal. Only the all-aware, all-knowing Vijnana exists. I think today we have just discussed some important points, and we will take up some important topics and subjects we will discuss later. Just to leaving the background of this very wonderful system is all the more important because in modern times there is a lot of consciousness studies happening. Frequently, the main problem is when we take a small little piece from out of context from many of these books and then suddenly make a big splashing interpretation in the light of modern discoveries. We may or may not do justice to the original text. But Yogachara system is the first attempt in the history of world philosophy that made consciousness the central focus of its study and contemplation. That is the uniqueness of Vijnanavada. Okay, thank you. Again, I want to repeat, it is called Vijnanavada because it focuses on consciousness. But that is only secondary name. Yogachara is a more standard title for the system because meditation is an important integral part of the system of philosophy. Thank you. Question and answers. You are most welcome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Sri Ram has his hand up first.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sri Ram. Go ahead.
You mentioned the connection to yoga. So the Asanga and Vasubandhu, you placed them around 3 or 400 AD. So they are after Patanjali. But the Chitta is not the same as the Alaya Vijnana, correct?
No, Patanjali's time is before Christ. This Asanga Vasubandhu, they belong to 3rd, 4th century AD, So, you mentioned something with Chitta. Please repeat that question again once more, please.
Chitta is not the same as Alaya Vijnana?
Yeah, so when you mention Chitta, Chitta Matrada, that means realizing the truth that Chitta alone exists. There, it means Alaya Vijnana only.
Okay.
Then
you talked about the 5 Jnana Indriya.
I want to repeat once more. See, the distinction between Alaya Vijnana and Pravritti Vijnana disappears when you realize Vijnapti Matrada, the Chitta Matrada Siddhi. So when you realize everything is ocean, then when you perceive a wave, you don't perceive it as independent of ocean. So then you don't have to call it ocean or wave. It's just one entity. So a distinction is necessary only when it has got a separate entity. When you realize the same reality, everything is only consciousness. So that experience takes you beyond alaya vijnana, pravritti vijnana distinction. The demarcation is no more.
Vijnana is the same as Chitta Vritti, Swamiji.
Eh? Yeah.
Pravritti Vijnana is the same as Chitta Vritti.
Roughly you may call it Chitta Vritti. That's true. The pravritti vijnana were independent and innumerable manifestations of alaya vijnana. Alaya vijnana contains is a repository of innumerable seeds, karmic seeds. You may call it samskaras, vrittis, etc. Left and accumulated in the alaya vijnana. It's a repository. So when you see an object outside, then these seeds they connect and immediately you perceive something as an independent entity. So when you become a parinishpanna, when you become a perfected soul, when nature becomes enlightened, then you don't connect like that. At that time, you are able to practice mindfulness. You are able to detach. At the same time, you are aware of it because you are detaching yourself from the wrong notion that waves are independent of ocean. That's all right. You are able to detach because of your spiritual enlightenment. So you can see Buddha's, the way Buddha looks. He doesn't seem to be particularly interested in anything. If you look at Sri Ramakrishna's picture, if you see, you don't think in his samadhi state, you don't think he is particularly focusing on anything. But it's a supreme state of supreme awareness, but without being aware of any particular objective independent entity. That is pure awareness. So Vijnapti Matrada is nothing of pure awareness, called in the Aitareya Upanishad, which is part of Rigveda Samhita, Prajnanam Brahma. Prajnanam is objectless awareness. Normally when you are aware of something, there is something that you are aware of. There is subject-object distinction. But suppose you think of awareness minus any object that you are aware of. Pure awareness. That is Vijnapti Matrada. So Vijnapti Matrada Siddhi, remember, it's an important book by Vasubandhu. That text itself. So it is as important as Yogachara Bhumi of Asanga. It's an important point. If you have any doubt, if you have any doubt, you have seen Ramana Maharshi's picture. Not when he is walking with the disciples or devotees. What is he looking at? But he has not closed his eyes. So what is he looking at? He is not looking at anything particularly. That is pure awareness. To give an example, I am just giving some approximate example. That's true also for a great mystic devotee. That's why I often mentioned there cannot be any kind of reconciliation or harmonization at the idea level, at the concept level. The moment you elevate yourself to a higher level of a journey in the world of experiences, then you suddenly find great minds, great thinkers, great spiritual seekers. We were all talking about the same thing. I am not making a carpet generalization for its own sake. Because I am not, though I have studied these systems of philosophy as an academic, but I am not presenting as an academic because academics flourish when there is a lot of conflict and debates. And frequently, as I mentioned earlier, you study Kant and Hegel, and after teaching the university, you don't go and meditate or you don't go to realize thing in itself. If you say you are going to realize Kantian thing in itself, you will lose your job. They may even question your sanity. It's an important thing. Hegelian dialectics, Hegelian thought system. Can you realize like the Yogachara, the Vijnapti Matrada? It is something meant to be realized, but not. So, I'm giving an example. So, in academic philosophy in India, with the Sankhya system is an example. One good example is Sankhya system. Sankhya system, unless you study the analysis of human mind and emotions and feelings given in Sankhya system and make use of it for your spiritual practice in Vedanta and Yoga system, Buddhist system, Sankhya system is just a very dry academic analysis. It doesn't have any direct link to life as a whole. When Yoga system became so famous thanks to Buddhists, you have to remember that. It was the Buddhists were practicing all these meditative disciplines in caves, actually. In fact, the first Buddhist council in 483 took place in a big cave in Rajagriha, in today's Bihar, which is a very celebrated place for many thinkers, including Navinaya, which is birth in Mithila district of Bihar. So, what I mean to say, so these Yogachara philosophers, if you go to the Ajanta, Ellora, many of the caves in different places in India, you can see the pictures, Buddhist monks meditating. They were all practicing different disciplines mentioned in Yogachara system. Otherwise, the Sankhya analysis of Prakriti Purusha and all that will not make any sense unless you try to understand human mind in the light of the Sankhyan analysis of Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara and things like that. Then suddenly it makes sense. But studying Immanuel Kant's thing in itself, you don't go and make an analysis in the light of your own life. You don't do that. So I'm giving an extreme example to emphasize the distinction between journey in the world of ideas and journey in the world of spiritual disciplines, spiritual experiences. This idea behind. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sri Ram. Before the next question, I'll just remind the listeners in real time, the viewers that are on YouTube in real time, as opposed to the recording later, that if they enter a question into the live chat, that I will see it and can ask that question for them, if time permits. So next question is from C. Gopinath. Thank you for standing by. Thank you.
Swamiji, the focus of Buddha originally was suffering. And analysis of suffering and causes of suffering and the Eightfold Path was directed at that. With these philosophers like Vasubandhu and so on focusing on consciousness, would you say they moved away from that original focus on suffering and they went into higher ideas and higher thoughts?
The dialectical ideas, different philosophical debates and discussions develop in a system of philosophy. This Vasubandhu and Asanga lived in the 3rd, 4th century AD, and Buddha passed away in 480 BC. So, roughly around 800 years nearly, or less than 800 years. So, that's a long period, the evolution of the spiritual philosophical tradition, Naturally, these great thinkers...
So, they moved away from that focus on suffering?
They did not move away because idea, for example, okay, I'm coming to that. The very concept of Tathagata Garbha, for example, teaches you that there is the potential for everyone to attain Buddhahood in everyone's idea. Now, many Buddhist scholars explain this in the light of Buddha's own narration of Jataka tales. 543 life cycles Buddha had. And each life cycle, he showed something unique. Great compassion, great wisdom, great discerning wisdom, higher spiritual qualities. Even when he was born as a monkey, it's called, he was he sacrificed his own life for the sake of his subjects. So, many Buddhas, entire range of Jataka tales is a kind of step-by-step evolution into Buddhahood. So, in each he showed something unique. So, some scholars have expressed the idea that the concept of Tathagata Garbha is anything alien to Buddha's original teachings. And Buddha's own Satipatthana Sutta, people teaching mindfulness in 21st century won't even refer to Buddha. They teach as if it is their own creation, but actually it is a discourse by Buddha. So, as centuries went by, different scholars, they developed different ideas. So, these three important figures, there are many others, Maitreya, Asanga and Vasubandhu. The contributions only made the profundity of Buddha, or the grandeur of Buddha's teachings more explicit for the followers, really speaking. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. David, you're next. Thank you very much.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
My question is regarding, you mentioned that Yogachara, he talked about karma yoga. How is karma yoga different in Vedanta, especially bhakti yoga versus in the Buddhist practice of karma yoga?
Yeah. So in Buddhism, I was referring to mindfulness. So when you combine awareness with detachment, you detach yourself from it because you realize it is impermanent. It's coming and going. Everything in this world is impermanent. So when you realize that, you are detaching yourself, because you get attached only when you consider it as something for all time, something valuable, something that you want. Behind every desire there is a kind of hidden thought that it may be there all the time for me. When the moment you realize it is impermanent, then you are distancing yourself from it. Not that you become inactive, but your obsessive liking for it, obsessive attachment to it is gone. When you realize that that it is no more permanent. And this happens at the same time when you are aware of it. If you cannot really practice detachment where you are not aware of it. Without awareness, detachment doesn't work. One may see, we may remain unaffected by something because we are not aware of it. But when we are aware of it, we may be affected by that. So detachment should be practiced along with awareness. So sati, smriti, awareness, understanding. You get established a permanent awareness. At the same time, you are detached from it. You are detached because you realize it is praditya samutpada. Dependent, it's not, it is, you realize it is, it is only parikalpita or paratantra. So then what happens is, you are free from it. In karma yoga, you do everything, whatever you are supposed to do. Because you can't sit quiet without doing anything. Action is inevitable. Nahi kasikshanamabhi jadu tishtadi akarma krita karyadehi avashak karma sarva pragadijaihi gunaihi. In Gita, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, even for one kshana, one split second, you cannot remain inactive mentally, physically and intellectually. If you are not active physically, you will be hyperactive mentally, full of desires, thoughts and so on. So no one can remain inactive entirely, physically and mentally. Not only that, if you try, you will have to work in a helpless manner. Karyadehi avashak karma. I mean, avasha means you are not with your own control. You are helpless. You have to keep doing things. So there is no scope for anyone to keep quiet, to do nothing, remaining mentally and physically doing nothing. Impossible. Physically, mentally it is impossible. So what you do, whatever you are doing, you do as a karma yoga. And then what happens is, you are doing everything, a great enthusiasm. At the same time, you think, well, I'm just doing my duty. Do your best in the best efficient manner, with full focus, but I'm only doing my duty. When you say that, you are detaching yourself from it. So awareness is there, that's why you are doing with great efficiency and enthusiasm. Detachment is there because, oh, it's just my duty. So you work as a master. So mindfulness is the royal highway to self-mastery. That's important. If you don't practice mindfulness, you are heading to your own enslavement. So both are almost parallel, almost identical. That's an important point to remember. Buddha's life itself was a great example of karma yoga. Swami Vivekananda tells us that a man who never built a temple for any deity, of course he became a great deity himself, Buddhist temples are so huge now. And there are so many other deities also in Buddhist temples. You can see some deities don't look very pleasant also, you can see. So you can find many books published by Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana and all that. Anyway, the point is, what I want to tell you is, Buddha never advocated belief in a creator God. But Buddha always insisted on doing things, your duty for others out of compassion. He did not talk about karma yoga, the word he did use, but the compassion he uses the word compassion. And you find in one of the Jataka tales, Mahakavi Jataka, Maha means a big huge monkey, was a king monkey. He sacrificed his own life just to save the lives of his subjects. There are many, just give an example. So that action was out of compassion. Karma yoga also is a compassion actually. You are not keeping quiet because you don't have any desire. You are active, but still you are practicing detachment. Almost identical. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Maharaj...
I want to ask you, excuse me, Bobby, am I clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. David, that was clear to you as well.
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah.
Yes, Swami. I do have one other thought, though. Is it sounds like that kind of mindfulness plus detachment sounds similar to the practice of Viveka. Would that be accurate? Viveka, the discrimination between permanent and impermanent?
Exactly, yeah. The same. They are interlinked. Every Buddhist practitioner will have all these qualities that we discuss in Vedanta. Nitya Nitya Vastu Vega Iga Matra Phala Viraga. That's why when you think of these systems as part of a journey in spiritual space, not in philosophical space, then you can find they're almost identical. Okay, thank you. Please, Bobby, please.
Yeah, Maharaj, I had a question, but one popped up on the live chat on YouTube, and I'll just read it verbatim. It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Swami, the samurai thought of their body as dead in order to perform their duty. Should we do the same, but for higher aspirations?
Could you repeat that question slowly?
Yes. Samurai,
Japanese samurais, yeah.
Yes. Thought of their body as dead in order to perform their duty. Should we do the same, but for higher aspirations?
Yeah, I think the samurai culture doesn't have anything to do with what we normally understand spirituality. It's a code of honor that existed in many of the ancient people, different cultures. The extreme sacrifice, the extreme dedication to the duty, that is there, but in a far-fetched manner, you may be able to link that to karma yoga and dedication, things like that. But frequently, if you look at the history, it was not entirely a spiritual concept, the samurai ideal of self-dedication. In some of the martial races in India, they had it there. But I cannot think of anything spiritual in that. There's something honorable, something respectable, something great, but to call it spirituality, it should be in a way useful for your own spiritual progression. That's very important. Duty for its own sake. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Maharaj, in the West, it's often assumed that the martial arts traditions have spiritual aspects to them, or at least are related, distantly related somehow.
That's part of martial arts tradition in Eastern countries. That's there. In fact, many of the ancient martial systems I'm coming from, meditation and prayer and worship, all these things are part of their system. When we talk about Buddhism and Vedanta, I don't think we have to need a long rope to connect them. Where you have to stretch it both ways, too far to see a link. You can say there is a great thing, there's something great in practicing chivalry, honor, all those things. There are many martial tribes in India who consider it beneath the dignity to do any work other than fighting. There are many such martial arts. Martial tribes in India for thousands of years. And British only had to use them for their own. So every battle that British fought, they got every battle won by Indians against fellow Indians, practically, When they went their small tiny kingdoms fighting with each other, they used one group against the other. That's wonderful. I don't know if you can call it anything spiritual, but at the same time I tell you, when a society stands together, united to preserve its culture and tradition, out of a sense of sanctity and sacredness to their lineage, then there is something profoundly spiritual in it, no doubt about it, absolutely no doubt. If you think of the last stand of the Masada, for example, the entire defending group, they perished in a way. So they were trying to defend their holy place against invaders. In India also, it happened on many occasions. The Rajputs, 30,000 women practiced. They flung themselves to fire, burning fire, to save their honor when the invaders, foreign invaders, Muslim invaders attacked parts of Rajasthan, Mewa, Uday, other places in Rajasthan. The stories are there, no doubt. So when a brave person, or a brave society, or a brave community expresses strong willpower, bravery and courage to preserve, to protect, to defend a tradition, a culture that they consider sacred as part of their lineage, and they don't care for their own survival, there is something profoundly spiritual in it. But, Buddha would not have agreed with that, We are talking about Buddhism here. Buddha belongs to an entirely different category. But Buddha would have approved of this because total lack of one's own comforts and dedicating oneself for the preservation of an ancient culture and tradition, there is something truly spiritual about it. That's true. But samurais were frequently, they were mercenaries. in some context. They were mercenaries, really speaking, samurais. They were men of honor and courage, but they were also mercenaries. So,
thank you, Master.
Yeah,
thank you. I'm going to withdraw my question and yield to David Milstein, who's
please.
standing by.
Hi, Swami. In Catholic theology, the concept of good works is prominent, and even in the Middle Ages, there was a raging controversy as to whether good works or devotion was the path to God. Could you compare the concept of good works as it was understood in Catholic theology to karma?
Yeah, no, good action, good work, out of compassion, kindness to fellow human beings, have a spiritual content in it. It has got an aspect of compassion behind it, no doubt about it. That is true. Buddha's teachings found in the Dhammapada, the 26th chapter, called Brahmana Varga. Brahmana here means an enlightened person, not any community. So, when he gives a list of the characteristics of an enlightened person, a wise person, then he talks about those who are doing good things for others after compassion. Him tam bruhi brahmanam, him I call a wise person, an enlightened person. That's how many of the verses end. It's a Pali script. So there is no doubt about it. Any act of compassion and kindness has got spiritual content in it, no doubt about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, David. Any follow-up?
Thank you.
Well, my question is how is karma and the practice of karma yoga more than compassion? In other words, if one is an adherent, how is that more than merely being compassionate in the sense of good works?
Thank you. I'm coming to that. It's a very relevant question. Now, when we do something out of kindness or compassion, on the one hand, the person whom we help is benefited, that's obvious. But that also helps us in our onward spiritual journey. So, from the parikalpita level to paratantra level to parinishpanna. So, our consciousness is sometimes defiled, not pure. Not because consciousness itself gets defiled, but it expresses itself in so many actions which are not actions of compassion. So when we practice something out of compassion, what happens is, that action produces a sattvic or spiritual asset, a spiritual residual effect. And that will purify our mind. This is well known and can be experimented. Somebody or any person who keeps doing something good out of compassion, kindness, even unconsciously, mechanically, will develop in spiritual life. He may be doing it out of compulsion, out of like a ritual, very mechanically. Even if a person mechanically does something good, it keeps doing something good, eventually that person begins to transform. If he does it consciously, the transformation becomes faster and more comprehensive. So, that's why in mindfulness, you are trying to save yourself from being defiled through selfish desires by practicing detachment. So also in karma yoga. If karma is done with great desire, it is not karma yoga. It is just karma action. But at the same time, the same work is done with total detachment, just out of compassion. it becomes a potent, very powerful instrument for one's own spiritual progress. This happens. Mind has a tendency to be affected by what we do. When mechanically, if you do mechanically, the effect will be much less. But if you do consciously, the effect is more profound and much more obvious.
Very good, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thanks to all the questioners.
Thank you. So we'll continue this discussion in the next session. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaste everyone. Namaste.